Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your host Thomas Tyree from On the Hot Podcast. Today, this will be episode 163 for you guys today. Of course, this episode is going to be coming out on all four of our platforms, our Instagram account, our Facebook account, our YouTube account, and our Apple Podcast account. So let's go ahead and dive into the first segment of the episode this week. In the world of NBA, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the Demar Derozan trade that transpired a few days ago in the sport of basketball inside the NBA world. So I'll break down how Demar Derozan ended up being a Sacramento King. I'll break down the three-team trade between the Kings, the Bulls, and the Spurs that transpired a few days ago in the NBA. So let's get down to it. DeMar DeRozan is now signed with the Sacramento Kings on a sign and trade deal. He signed a 3-year, $74 million contract in the sign and trade deal. The Kings traded away Harrison Barnes to the San Antonio Spurs in an unprotected 2031 pick swap. And they've also traded away Chris Duarte and 2 second-round picks to the Chicago Bulls. And I do believe there was some cash involved in that three-way trade for the Kings to help out the Bulls in this particular situation. So, my thoughts on this trade for the Kings. When Kendrick Lamar made that diss song, They Not Like Us, well, I'm glad DeMar DeRozan came home. Y'all didn't deserve him either. That's crazy. The man spoke into existence. He's back in California, back on the West Coast, playing now for the Sacramento Kings. And this trade helps the Sacramento Kings possibly become a playoff team once again in the Western Conference. They made the playoffs back in the 2022-23 regular season. They were the 3rd seed in the Western Conference, but then this past NBA season, they missed the playoffs. Now, DeMar DeRozan, don't get me wrong, can still play at a high level. And looking at his stats, he was forgotten with the Chicago Bulls. I mean, in the East, they weren't really known for being a good team. They were the bottom of the barrel play-in tournament team at best. But now DeMar DeRozan, you get a reliable shooter. You get him to play alongside good players of De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis. And now you see the Kings in a situation where they're not really truly contenders yet, but this helps move the needle for them to be a really aggressive team out in the Western Conference. It gives them a chance to get back into the playoffs this upcoming NBA season. I think the team still needs to develop defensively. If they could do that with those 3 offensive players and DeMar DeRozan really being the 3rd option behind De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis, I think this team could go a long ways in the Western Conference if they make the right trades and they develop their talent very well in the Western Conference. So now, thoughts on the Spurs making this trade, being a part of this trade. I think the Spurs have a well-balanced roster now. I mean, don't get me wrong. Is it the best in the Western Conference? And are they a playoff team? Picture perfectly a playoff team? No. But well-balanced because you signed Chris Paul this offseason. You just traded for Harrison Barnes. I think there could be a sleeper team to get the 8th seed because, like I said, you just traded for those 2 veteran players. You have Greg Popovich, one of, if not the greatest basketball coach of all time there. They also still have their young, talented players, Victor Wembanyama, and they drafted Stefan Castle, guard from UConn, who helped contribute to that back-to-back season last year that UConn went on. So I think that Spurs are not going to be a championship contending team, but don't sleep on them to get the 8th and final spot for the playoffs this upcoming NBA season out in the Western Conference. Now, last but not least, the Bulls. Thoughts on the Bulls for this matter? Too little, too late. And what I mean by that is you should have traded away DeMar DeRozan quicker, much sooner, because now you're getting this trade in this 3-way trade. You really lost this trade and got the less value out of the other 2 respective teams of the Spurs and the Kings because Chris Duarte and getting 2 second-round picks for DeMar DeRozan, and cash, how does that really help the Chicago Bulls in their rebuild? And I said on the podcast several times months ago, over and over again, and teams that should rebuild in the NBA, it's always been the Chicago Bulls. And they did not do that properly when they should have traded away big trade assets at the time when they had Zach LaVine, when they had DeMar DeRozan, and then blow up the team. And now you're really suffering the consequences of only getting 2 second-round picks for somebody that you could at least still got a first-round pick for, and cash, and a player, Chris Duarte, that averaged, off the top of my head, I want to say 3 points a game last year, 4 points a game. I don't know how that's going to help the rebuild. The Chicago Bulls are in for in the Eastern Conference in terms of rebuilding. But I think the Kings are a better team on paper now. And it's going to be interesting to see how they mix up with the other teams in the West. The Spurs, I think those veteran players of Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes are really going to help out those young players of Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle, especially Chris Paul. They use his wisdom towards Stephon Castle, who is going to be an up-and-coming guard heading into the NBA. And you get to learn from one of the greatest learning trees that you could possibly learn from heading into the NBA, and a veteran player, one of the greatest point guards of all time, in Chris Paul. So I like it for 2 out of 3 teams, this 3-way trade. But those are my thoughts on DeMar DeRozan getting traded to the Sacramento Kings.